Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Back today to do another video for Herstoryathon, the read-along that is month-long through March, where we are celebrating Women's History Month by reading either fiction or non-fiction about real women of the past. Now, I always say that you only need to read one book in this category in order to qualify as having participated in Herstoryathon. However, we do have our handy little prompt grid, which we update every year with some new prompts. There are some that always stay the same, but I thought today I would go through some recommendations if you are, midway through your Herstoryathon and wanting to get some fresh ideas that may go along with some of these prompts. The first one being women's health, in which my first recommendation would be The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. I feel like I recommend this every Herstoryathon, but it is just that good. The real life story about these women in the early 20th century who worked painting watch dials but using radium paint, were told that it was completely safe, and then the medical issues that ensued and their fight for compensation. For something that is a little bit broader, you could read Unwell Women by Eleanor Cleghorn, about the various ways that illness in women have been pathologized and disregarded in medical practice. Or alternatively, you could read The Immortal Life of Henrietta by Rebecca Skloot, looking at with an instance where a woman's ill health was used to exploit her and her family. Henrietta Lacks was a black woman whose cancer cells were used, sampled without her permission, and then when it turned out that they were ever increasing and wouldn't die, would be used for various scientific experiments and discoveries, and yet she and her family were never actually compensated. The next prompt for this year's grid is the Over 30s Club, kind of tipping a hat to the fact that I am turning 30 during Herstoryathon, and with this we were wanting to honour women who kind of got their break when they were 30 and over. The first of my recommendations being Elizabeth Gaskell by Jenny Uglow. Elizabeth Gaskell you'll know as the author of North and South, Wives and Daughters, Cranford, who was a writer throughout her life but was only first published when she was 38. Similarly, I can recommend Charlotte Bronte, A Life by Claire Harman. Once again, Charlotte Bronte and her sisters wrote throughout their lives, but her first novel wasn't published until she was 31. Or for an earlier time period, you could read about Katherine Parr, who herself was 30 when she married Henry VIII. The next prompt on this grid is controversial woman. This could mean a woman who was controversial in her day, but who has maybe been reappraised, or it could be somebody who is still thought to be quite controversial. My first recommendation for this is Staying in the Tudor Court, and it is Young and Damned and Fair by Gareth Russell, looking at the life of Catherine Howard, who was the fifth wife of Henry VIII and the second of his wives to be executed. And whereas now most historians believe that Anne Boleyn was innocent of the charges that she was convicted against, the evidence is a little bit more damning for Catherine Howard. However, in recent years there has been a little bit more of a reappraisal of her, and particularly thinking about how young she was, how the men she was accused to have been having relationships, whether adulterous or not, were actually much older than her and most likely were taking advantage of her. I would definitely recommend reading a little bit about Mary Wollstonecraft. Mary Wollstonecraft is well remembered now for her proto-feminist thinking, but in her day, and especially just after she died, was seen as very scandalous, especially when her husband, William Godwin, revealed more sordid details of her romantic life that had not previously been known. And reading about Mary Wollstonecraft, you could read Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon, which is a dual biography of Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter Mary Shelley. Alternatively, if you're wanting to read some fiction on Mary Wollstonecraft, you could read Love and Fury by Samantha Silva. Either option are fantastic. For the Friends pick, I could recommend Bluestockings by Suzannah Gibson. This might be a little bit of a tenuous one, but is looking at the 18th century intellectual group, the Bluestockings, who would all meet up together to discuss literature, art, philosophy, history. I say this is slightly tenuous because yes, they were technically friends, they would meet up at each other's houses, but also I would say maybe potentially not friends because of how quick they would be to condemn each other should any of them go against the grain. Another recommendation for Friends pick, which you could also use for the foodie prompt, is The Language of Food by Annabel Abbs, which is looking at the life of Eliza Acton, who was a poet who was recommended by her publisher to instead write cookbooks, that this was going to be more appealing to the masses than her poetry, who would then enlist the help of a servant at her home, Anne, who was a fantastic cook, in order to write this recipe book, and along with a love of food developed a real friendship along the way. For the pre-1500s prompts, there are so many different options that I could have chosen. Having recently read the sequel, The Queen's Mother, I could definitely recommend Cecily by Annie Garthwaite, which is fiction looking at the life of Cecily Neville, who was wife to Richard, Duke of York, and mother to Edward IV and Richard III. I could recommend Joan by Catherine J. Chen, a fictionalisation of the life of Joan of Arc, which depicts her life and her mission to fight for France in a slightly less divinely inspired way. Once again, if you're looking for something that is a little bit more broader and more encompassing, encompassing, there is The Once and Future Sex by Eleanor Janega, Going Medieval on Women's Roles in Society, which is a general look at medieval women, their lives, the expectations put upon them, and whether medieval women were actually living up to the mould that society was trying to put upon them. The last new prompt for this year is actually translated to read fiction or non-fiction about a woman of the past that has been translated into English from another language. And I realised, to my shame, that I actually, up until this year's readathon, haven't actually read anything that fits within my Herstoryathon remit. But this is where I enlisted a little bit of help, and I contacted Brittany over at Literally Smitten, who has previously been our co-host for Herstoryathon, because this was one of the prompts that she was really passionate about, and I know that she has had some really fantastic recommendations within the translated prompt, and so I'm going to insert a little clip of Brittany here now, doing a little cameo for Herstoryathon this year, in which she's going to recommend a fantastic translated women's history.
Hi there, my name is Brittany from over at Literally Smitten, and who you can't see is Memphis, my German short hair pointer puppy, on my lap. He has insisted on joining me for filming. Anyway, my recommendation for the translated prompt of the Herstoryathon is The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich, which is translated from Russian. And this is honestly one of my favorite nonfiction books, one of my favorite books of all time. It is an oral history about the women on the front lines, on the home front, and also in occupied territories during World War II. It is absolutely heart-wrenching. The stories of bravery and loss, resilience, sort of the fragility of life, and just everything, the hardship that they faced during the war and after it. And it's interesting because it is an oral history, so it is a collection of stories from the mouths of these women, and it is just so raw, and really one of the few like non-fiction history books that I could say has actually made me shed tears. I was weeping through parts of this. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I would 10 out of 10 recommend it in that format, but I did also get the physical book so that I have it with the intent of rereading it one day very soon so that I can mark up all of the beautiful lines, all of those really poignant moments that made this book magical.
So there we go, those are all of mine and Brittany's recommendations to go along with this year's prompts for Herstoryathon. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of inspiration if you are partway through the month and just needing some new ideas of something to read. Do let me know if you've read any of the books I've spoken about today. Alternatively, please let me know about any of your recommendations for the Herstoryathon prompts this year. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.